Sure, I was on time.
Well, good morning. I would now like to welcome the Honorable Tim Houston, Premier of Nova Scotia. Joining him today is Jason Hollett, Associate Deputy Minister of the Department of Environment and Climate Change. The Premier will make a brief statement and then take questions from media in the room and on the phones. Go ahead, Premier.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Our government committed to sharing a carbon plan with Nova Scotians, and I am pleased to share it today, and I think you will all see that it's better than a carbon tax. Nova Scotia is already a national leader in reducing carbon emissions and fighting climate change. And under the plan we'll talk about today, we will go even further. Last fall, we passed the Environmental Goals and Climate Change Reduction Act and committed to the most ambitious 2030 GHG targets in the country. Under that legislation, there's a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by more than the federal targets. Committed to 80% renewable energy target by 2030, ensures the closures of Nova Scotia's coal plants by 2030, and establishes a 30% zero emissions vehicle standard. This is what real climate action looks like. It's not about posturing, and it's not about picking fights. Instead, what we're doing is we're just getting to work. We're acting now to protect our province, our country, and our planet, and our future. This legislation was the basis for our submission to the federal government for a made in Nova Scotia alternative that is better than a carbon tax. And let me be clear, our path to 2030 is more effective, it's more affordable, and it's more visionary than a carbon tax. But what we cannot accept, what I cannot accept, is a carbon tax that deliberately imposes financial pain on struggling Nova Scotians when inflation is already at an all-time high. Hundreds of thousands of Nova Scotians live in rural and suburban areas where there is no public transit, where their age or their family circumstances don't allow them to bicycle or walk to work or anywhere else. They've done nothing wrong, and they should not be punished with a carbon tax, especially not when Nova Scotia has a proven record of success and has put forward a better plan. In 2020, the province's emissions were 36% below 2005 levels. That's the second biggest reduction in the country. We've invested in renewable energy and energy efficiency, including wind, hydroelectricity, and are actively exploring green hydrogen in the future. This proven track record is the reason Nova Scotia should be respected, and when we lay out a plan to forge our own path to 2030, rather than be punished with a 14-cent a litre increase in gas and the price of gas. Nova Scotia has historically and will continue to disproportionately contribute more to Canada's climate change goals. Our province pays some of the highest energy costs in the country, and increasing those costs through an additional tax, particularly when there is a better way, just increasing the taxes will not significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But our plan will. Our targets exceed federal 2030 carbon tax reductions. The carbon tax would only reduce GHG emissions by roughly 2%. Nova Scotia's plan would reduce them by 17%. The federal government's carbon tax approach would add more than $2,000 in annual cost to the average Nova Scotian household in 2025 and over $3,000 in 2030. Our plan would see those costs to households increase, but the increase would be less than $500 per household in 2030. Nova Scotia can achieve its ambitious targets without a punishing federal carbon tax. It would be unfair for the federal Liberal government to ignore the sacrifices of Nova Scotians because it does not meet an arbitrary definition of a carbon price. Yesterday, I met with the Federal Minister of the Environment and Climate Change, and we're hopeful that they will review our unique Nova Scotia situation with an open mind. We are hopeful they will make their decision based on the planet, based on the future of the planet, based on environmental science and not political science. Our path is better than a carbon tax, and it's more affordable, which cannot be ignored, as Nova Scotians, like all Canadians, are living through a cost of living crisis. We've heard many well-rehearsred and very political talking points from many government officials over the last few weeks, but we should be very, very honest about what's happening here in Nova Scotia. We're championing green issues. We're fighting climate change is important to me. It's important to my government. But the fight against climate change should not be about politics. It should be about what will protect the planet and actually lower emissions the fastest. And on the affordability issue, I know the federal government has advanced the position that 8 of 10 families would get more money back under their program, but we just don't accept that. The reality is that only a portion of the direct costs would be reimbursable, meaning even with rebates, the federal plan will still cost the average household at least an extra $1,500 a year. I don't support punishing Nova Scotians with a carbon tax, but nor am I prepared to side with those who want to ignore the climate crisis or deny that climate change is an issue. I'm not even saying not ever to carbon pricing, but I am saying not now. I am saying it's not necessary here in Nova Scotia because we have a better option. Our plan is better for the environment. Our Made in Nova Scotia plan has some of the most aggressive benchmarks in the country, and it will show results. So I've asked the federal government to look at our plan, hold us accountable for the timelines in there, and if we can't meet them, then at that time we can have a discussion about carbon tax if it's necessary. But I remain hopeful that the Liberal government will work with us and not punish Nova Scotians. A carbon tax would treat us in many ways like we're the enemy, like Nova Scotians are the enemy, but we're not the enemy. Climate change is the enemy. So we have an opportunity to lead the way in the fight against climate change, but we have to park the carbon tax and focus on a better way to do it, and that's what we're asking the federal government.
Premier, you say that this plan is based largely on the legislation that you passed last fall. The feds obviously have known about that legislation, presumably since you passed it. They would be aware of it, and yet it only seems to be advanced to them as the plan now. I'm wondering why that is and why you think Minister Guilbeault will go for that, given that he's already aware of this plan and has been pretty clear on his view about the need to price carbon.
A couple things. I don't want to presuppose what the federal government would do. Obviously, they have their position. The federal government has targets, and their goal is to make sure that those targets are achieved. We actually have targets here in Nova Scotia. They're legislated. It's very rare. Not many provinces have, no other province has put the comprehensive legislation forward that we have. So that's an important fact. But so the two targets are consistent. Ours are stronger, actually, than the federal government. What we're saying is we have a path to achieve those targets. So with the federal government's goal is purely to meet those targets, we have that path. And our situation is unique to Nova Scotia, and they should consider that. So that's what we're asking. I think that what is new is that we're, and it's not that new, but it's newish in the context of your question, is we're demonstrating to them that we have a path to meet our targets. And when we meet our targets, we're meeting their targets. So what more could they possibly want? And at the same time, the path that we have, the plan that we have is better in so many respects, but it's certainly more affordable. So we're on target to meet what they want us to do. We can do it in a more effective way, we can do it in a more efficient way, we can do it in a more affordable way. And we want them to respect that.
And to what degree is this plan, Premier, predicated on you getting approval for the Atlantic Loop?
The Atlantic Loop, like the mix on the grid, the greening of the grid is obviously critical to achieving our reductions. So the Atlantic Loop is a possible tool. Atlantic Loop would certainly make it easier. There's no question about that. But I think there's other ways we can do that, and I think we've demonstrated that as well.
So just to put a fine point on this, if you can't get approval for the Atlantic Loop, the money you need, because obviously you can't go it alone, that won't cripple this plan that you're submitting.
No. The Atlantic Loop would be, it would make it easier, for sure. There's no question about that. The Atlantic Loop has a lot of potential, can do a lot of good. But it certainly requires federal participation in that. But if we can't, like, we're focused on affordability for Nova Scotians, so we'll look at other options. But what never leaves our sight is affordability for Nova Scotians.
Premier, Mr. Guilbeault, and some of your own internal reports have suggested that a carbon tax, though, could be revenue neutral. The money could go back to taxpayers as rebates. Did I understand you that you're a little skeptical of whether those rebates actually capture the full costs that taxpayers pay? Is that?
Yeah, I would use a stronger word than skeptical.
What would that be?
I don't believe that that this is. If I step back and I say if the carbon tax is a moneymaker for families, which the federal government has advanced that 8 of 10 families actually make money off of carbon tax, then why would they even do it? Like, it just doesn't. I'm not familiar with a lot of programs where the federal government is like a bank where you give them money and they give you more back. That's not the way it works. But so the reality is that there are many elements to what make up a cost increase, and some of them are very, very direct, and some of them are indirect. And I believe that the indirect elements are not captured in the federal government's analysis.
I think in fairness to the feds, I believe why they do it, though, is they're really trying to target those large emitters, right, while trying to minimize the pain on the average household. I think that's their logic.
What does this, to that point, what does this plan do then, Premier, to target large emitters in this province? The Nova Scotia Powers, the mining companies, the Michelins, the Lafarges? Yeah,
so, I mean, we're looking at it's an overall goal across the province, right? So it's a reduction across the province. In terms of, and there's many elements to what, some things that go into that. So I think what specifically about large emitters, there's other tools. Like a carbon tax is a very widespread, blunt approach. But as a provincial government, we have other tools, and companies operating in this province, they know what our goals are, they know what our standards are, and we can directly work with them to make sure that they achieve them. There's other tools outside of the wide-ranging carbon tax, but don't forget that this is an overall. It's an overall goal.
I get that. I guess, though, what would you say to an average citizen who's looking at this and thinks, great, we're going to achieve our targets in theory, but Lafarge can belch whatever it wants into the environment, and gold mines can belch whatever they want into the environment, because there's no longer a focused incentive for them to operate in a more efficient, clean way.
I don't agree that a carbon tax is the only incentive to get them to operate in a hard way.
I'm asking you then, if your argument is that that's not the right fit for here, what is this province's plan to try to address that aspect?
Well, the category of emissions you're talking about, just the nature of our economy, is it's the most significant emissions come from our electrical system, right? So there's another subcategory around manufacturing for sure. But what I would say to that Nova Scotian is we're on track to meet our targets. We're on track to do it. We can do it in a way that's better, more effective. We can do it in a way that's more affordable for you. And as we track towards meeting our overall target, of course we're not going to let some large player jeopardize the targets of the province, and we'll look at those as necessary and take appropriate action.
Premier, you said this is what a real climate action plan looks like. Do you consider that the federal plan is not real?
No, but ours is definitely real. We have legislated goals, significant number, 28 goals. No other province has done that. And the goals we've set out are more aggressive than the federal government. That's a real approach to tackling climate change.
What happens, Premier, because whether this plan gets accepted by Ottawa or they impose carbon tax, it seems pretty clear that cap and trade is done. What happens to the Green Fund, and how will your government fund renewable energy projects, incentives, the type of things that so far the Green Fund has been paying for?
Yeah, so we're obviously committed to meeting the targets for sure, and there's many elements to that through Green Fund, through demand side management, the work of Efficiency One. There's all kinds of programs that are in place there. But what I would say is that those are investments that we're committed to making, because we're committed to meeting the targets. And we can't forget either that the cap and trade program was only ever a temporary thing. It's ending. And it was known to be ending. And when we took government a year ago, there was no evidence to me that the prior government had been looking at what they were going to do next or where it was all going to go. So we took that on. We've been doing the work, and we're committed to meeting the targets. We're committed to greening the planet. You don't have to look around. You can see that climate change is real. You can see what's happening in the world. So we feel very strongly our obligation to do what we can, and we'll do it.
So is that to say then, because I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is that to say that in the absence of the Green Fund, your government is prepared to continue funding the type of projects that the Green Fund was used to bankroll?
We're committed to continuing to invest in meeting our targets for sure. And the federal government has a number of programs as well that we'll partner with them on opportunities for sure. But the commitment is, I can't say it any stronger, is to meet these targets.
Premier, do you have any sense at this stage from the federal government when they will make a decision on this proposal?
Everybody feels a sense of urgency. There was a deadline, September 1st, I think it was, to submit where we wanted to go with things. So we've done that. They've received it, and we know that we're hopeful that they'll take a serious look at that and a review of the incredible amount of work that's been done by the department staff here. We expect to hear from them pretty quickly, whether that's a round of discussions and back and forth on questions on kind of the numbers and stuff like that. I would welcome that. I'd love to see everyone get in the same room at that level and have those discussions, but we'll hear from them very quickly.
And Premier, so if they do say no, will you consider that you shot your shot, and then would you be open to carbon tax, or what would be the next steps after that?
Well, if the federal government does not accept our plan, then it's certainly within their rights to enforce and push the carbon tax down on Nova Scotians, and we would have no recourse against that. So we put forward a better plan. It's more effective, it's more efficient, and it's more affordable for Nova Scotians. And all three of those points they're all equally important. The affordability issue is of course front and center, but the plan is better. So we put it forward. They'll review it. They'll make their decision. But we're hopeful that they'll agree.
I assume other provinces have emissions reduction plans. What makes your pitch to the federal government, and what makes Nova Scotia more unique or special?
I don't know what the other provinces have done and how it's but what my message to the federal government is, I'm not just saying no to a carbon tax. I actually think a carbon tax is an appropriate tool at the right time, at the right place. It's just in Nova Scotia, it's not necessary. We're on track to meet targets that are stronger than the federal government. So it's not necessary, and we've laid out that evidence for them. So I'm not sure what arguments other provinces have advanced, but I mean certainly in Atlantic Canada, some of our neighbors would have similar situations, and we'd be happy to work with them on an Atlantic kind of carbon plan. But this is our plan. We put it forward, and it's thoughtful, and it's better than the carbon tax.
We'll stop here for a moment.
Yesterday and presented this plan. Did he give you any indication or any thought on what these numbers say? It sounds like you're going beyond their targets. What was his impression?
Yeah, so it's better. It's much better when you look at the potential for reduction of greenhouse gases. Like the carbon tax could reduce them by 2%. Our plan would show 17%. That's much better. So I'm hopeful that they'll review it, and we'll give it a serious look. The only thing I could say is he did take it with him. He didn't leave it on the table. So
We'll check in with the reporters. We'll check in with the reporters participating by phones now. We've got Jennifer Henderson with the Halifax Examiner. Go ahead, Jennifer. We'll do one question, one follow-up.
Good morning, Premier. I'm wondering I'm wondering, although we can, I'm wondering if the main difference between the Nova Scotia plan and the federal plan is that the Nova Scotia plan protects small and medium businesses, whereas the federal plan would not provide rebates for them. Is that the primary difference?
No, actually, if I put that in the bucket of kind of affordability, I think the fact that our plan is more affordable is just a byproduct of the plan. The real focus for us is the plan is better. It actually leads to more greenhouse gas reductions. That's the thing. And in terms of the, look, as I said, the federal plan around the carbon tax. It's an approach that they're using across the countries, across every jurisdiction. But to our mind, Nova Scotia is in a unique situation. And so what we're saying is we have stronger targets. We'll meet them. And we have the street credibility to say that, given our track record. We're already a national leader. So this is a province where Nova Scotians are. They know how to conserve. I mean, our farmers, fishers, foresters. These are Nova Scotians who make a livelihood off conservation. So this is a very Nova Scotian thing to protect the planet. So we've been doing what has been necessary, as evidenced by the fact that we're a national leader. And what we're saying is we will continue to do that, and you can see that in our legislation, which other provinces haven't done, and you can see that in our plan to meet our legislated targets. And affordability is a very good byproduct of it. That we can get it done, and we can get it done in a way that's more affordable for Nova Scotians.
Go ahead with your follow-up, Jennifer.
The feds may argue that although Nova Scotia has made great strides and great progress in bringing down emissions, we also started from a higher or a worse place in terms of, having so many coal-fired power plants that our carbon intensity, I think, was one of the highest provinces. I think we were second after Alberta in terms of of the intensity of emissions. So they may argue that although we're bringing them down, it still doesn't get us off the hook. You know what I'm talking about? I mean, it's fine to say we're reducing them at a higher percentage than their target, but in fact, what I'm saying is, we may have started in a worse place.
First off, I want to be very clear. Nobody's trying to get off any hook on climate change. In fact, what we've put forward is goals that are stronger than the federal government, and we're committed to meeting them. So I haven't heard the federal government advance the argument that it was easy for us, which seems to be kind of what you're almost implying there. I don't think it's been easy, and I think that's evidenced by the power rates we pay. I mean, Nova Scotians have made significant investments in doing better for our planet, and we've seen that in the Muskrat Falls investment. We've seen that in all kinds of investments to green the grid. So nobody's looking for an easy path. We're looking for the right path, and we have a better path, and we've explained that to the federal government.
Moving on, we'll go to the Guysborough Journal. Lois Andort. Go ahead, Lois.
Yes, hello. Good morning. Thank you for taking my questions. When I look at a change in the energy mix, the first thing I think about is also a change in employment status for people. So does the government have a plan to help people make the shift from the old kind of fossil fuel-based energy economy to moving into the new green energy workforce?
I'm not exactly sure that I think that investments in meeting our targets, investments in greening our grid, I think will be good for our economy. So I think that it can lead to economic growth. I don't think it's going to. I don't think it's going to hurt our economy. If I understand your question correctly, that's what my answer is.
Go ahead with your follow-up, Lois.
Okay, my follow-up is that some of the pieces in this path as it's put out at the moment don't have approval yet. I mean, such as we're talking about the Atlantic Loop, and other projects that are still on the drawing board. So what are the repercussions if the province fails to meet the targets that they have set out for themselves?
Yeah, so and that's actually a good point. So one of the things we've said to the federal government is to keep a close eye on what we're doing here, and we said like by 2025, 2026, you check in, and if at some point the federal government reaches a conclusion that we're no longer on the path to meet our targets, then they can hold us accountable to that, and that would be the repercussion. And at that time, maybe a carbon tax is appropriate. It's just right now we have a better way than the carbon tax.
Checking in with our final outlet on the phone, that's Radio Canada. Eloise, go ahead. Okay then.
The regulations that go along with the act that this plan is based on?
Regulations under the Environmental Goals and Climate Change Reduction Act. So the 28 goals that are listed under the Act are 28 separate goals. Some of them are policies, some of them are programs, some of them will need regulations. But as an example, as the Premier was saying, the 80% renewable energy target, that is legislated right now, and we're continuing to progress on all of those objectives.
Right, but is there a timeline to finish the regulations that need to be completed?
I think, like I said, there's several different sets of regulations, programs, policies under each of them. We're continuing work on all of them.
Premier, what's this plan called? Is it the better than a carbon tax plan, or there was cap and trade? What do you call this plan?
You can go with the better than a carbon tax. It is better than a carbon tax.
If accepted, is there a deadline on this plan? Do you know? Is there any details like that?
From the federal government?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's urgent. How long does it last?
Yeah. If this plan was accepted, is there then a deadline like the cap and trade, which ended after 3 years?
This would be the path that would take us through 2030 and beyond, for sure. Yeah.
Premier, you said the cost would be less than $500, but with the federal plan, at least $1,500 a year, even with the rebates. You mentioned the rebates there, but in the news release, it just says $2,000 in annual costs and $3,000 by 2030. Why is it in the news release? Would that not be what you said here of at least $1,500 a year, even with the rebates? Would that not be more a realistic picture to present Nova Scotians?
I mean, we've given the numbers, both sets of numbers. I mean, we could probably argue on what should be in the news release and what shouldn't, but I mean, I'm just here telling you what the numbers are.
That's all the time we have, folks. Thank you very much.